Brittany was a woman who had learned to handle all her struggles on her own. Her life, after divorcing Mark, had become a cycle of workdays, caring for her son, Ethan, and rare moments of peace she found in the quiet of her small home. Her job as a massage therapist at a local spa not only provided her with income, but also constant attention from the men who came for sessions. Brittany was a beautiful woman. Her slender figure, long chestnut hair, and green eyes attracted attention, but she kept her distance, unwilling to let anyone into her life. She knew her heart hadn't fully healed from the past, and her main concern was Ethan, her 6-year-old son, who needed her love and protection. One evening, after work, Brittany stopped by a small grocery store. She didn't expect that this day would become a turning point for her. In the store, she noticed a man standing by the wine aisle, pondering his choice. It was John, a tall, athletic man with dark hair and brown eyes. Their eyes met, and a conversation began. They talked about wine, work, and life. Brittany felt that this man was somehow similar to her. He too carried the weight of his past, but tried to remain strong. They exchanged phone numbers, and from that moment, their lives began to change. John had been divorced for 3 years. His ex-wife, Michelle, had custody of their 2 children, 8-year-old Lisa and 6-year-old Michael. Michelle couldn't accept the divorce and constantly tried to win John back, using any means necessary, including threats and manipulation. She threatened to take the children away, or even harm herself if John didn't return to the family. John tried to be a good father, but his relationship with Michelle grew increasingly tense. He felt trapped in a cage where every move was controlled by his ex-wife. Brittany and John began meeting after work. They spent evenings and nights together, forgetting about sleep, captivated by each other. Brittany felt that she had finally found someone who understood her. John, in turn, felt that with Brittany, he could be himself, without masks or pretense. However, their relationship wasn't without challenges. Brittany had Ethan, who needed her attention and care. John had 2 children living with Michelle. They couldn't simply move in together, as they had no way to combine their families. Brittany didn't want Ethan to feel abandoned, and John feared that Michelle would use their relationship against him. Meanwhile, Michelle, having learned about John's new romance, began to act. She called him at night, threatening to take the children and never let him see them again. John tried not to give in to her manipulations, but the tension grew. Michelle felt she was losing control of her life and decided to punish Brittany. She drank a few glasses of wine to bolster her courage and devised a plan. One evening, as Brittany was walking home from work, she was attacked. Someone pushed her from behind, she fell face first onto the pavement, and in that moment, her earrings were ripped from her ears. Brittany was in shock, but managed to make it home. The next day, she went to the police to report the assault. However, the investigation dragged on, and Brittany began to lose hope for justice. The bruises on her face were too noticeable, and she was afraid her clients would see them and start asking questions. Brittany had always taken pride in her work and professionalism, and the thought of her clients seeing her in such a state filled her with panic. In the morning, before work, she stood in front of the mirror for a long time, trying to conceal the bruises with foundation and powder. Her hands trembled, and she broke down in tears several times, but forced herself to pull together. At the spa, she avoided making eye contact with clients. When someone entered the room, she lowered her head or turned so the bruises were less visible. One of her regular clients, a man named Tom, noticed her strange behavior, but Brittany brushed off his questions, saying she was just tired. After the attack, Brittany began crying frequently. She tried to do it when Ethan was at school or already asleep, but sometimes the tears came suddenly, and she couldn't hold them back. One evening, while cooking dinner, her hands began to shake, and she dropped a plate on the floor. The plate shattered, and Brittany, staring at the shards, felt a wave of panic. She sat on the floor, wrapped her arms around herself, and began to sob. Ethan, frightened, ran to her and hugged her. His words, "Don't cry, Mommy, I love you," made Brittany feel a little better, but she realized she couldn't continue living like this. She decided to see a psychologist to help her cope with the trauma. Meanwhile, Michelle continued her games. She called John at night, threatening that if he didn't return to her, she would take the children and move to another city. John tried to remain calm, but her words affected him. He felt cornered. He didn't want to lose his children, but he also couldn't return to Michelle. He knew their relationship was toxic, and going back to her would destroy him. One day, Brittany went to the home of one of her clients, Jessica, to give her a massage. Jessica was a young, beautiful woman with long blonde hair and blue eyes. Her husband, an influential businessman, was known for his connections and resources. During the session, Brittany told Jessica about the attack and her struggles. Jessica, kind and empathetic, immediately called her husband and asked him to help. A few hours later, Brittany was called to the police station, where she was told that the attacker had been found. It was Michelle. Having learned about John's romance with Brittany, she had decided to take revenge. In a drunken state, she had devised a plan and carried it out, seizing the opportunity. The police issued a restraining order, prohibiting Michelle from approaching Brittany and John, with the threat of jail time if she violated it. John, upon learning what had happened, was furious, but also felt guilty for putting Brittany in danger. They decided to be more cautious and not give Michelle any reasons for further attacks. Brittany and John continued to see each other, but now their relationship had become even more complicated. They understood that the path to happiness would be long and difficult, but they were willing to fight for their future. Brittany dreamed that one day they could unite their families and live together, but for now, it remained just a dream. John and Lisa seemed like the perfect couple. They had been together for 27 years, raised 3 children, and built a strong family. But behind the facade of happiness lay a drama that ultimately destroyed their marriage. John was 50 years old and proud of how well he had maintained himself. A full head of hair, though graying, a fit body, and an energy that attracted women. Lisa, his wife, was 3 years younger. Together, they had spent many years filled with love, trust, and mutual understanding. They had 3 children, 25-year-old Michael, 20-year-old Emily, and their youngest, 5-year-old Sophia. Sophia was John's treasure, a late-in-life child who brought new joy into their lives. Their relationship seemed ideal. John had never cheated on Lisa, though he had been with other women before their marriage. He was loyal to her because he loved and respected her. Lisa, too, had never given him any reason to doubt her. Their intimate life was vibrant and varied, which only strengthened their bond. But everything changed in an instant. In the summer of 2023, they had planned to celebrate their 27th wedding anniversary with a trip to Hawaii. However, the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted their plans, forcing them to postpone. But this turned out to be a minor inconvenience compared to what happened next. In February 2024, John received an anonymous message. Someone had sent him a video of Lisa and her colleague, 41-year-old Mark, having sex in his office during a company party. Mark was married, had a 14-year-old daughter, and held a position slightly higher than Lisa's in the same company. John was in shock. He felt as though he had been slammed face first into a concrete wall and then run over by a steamroller. John's first reaction was rage. He wanted to confront Lisa immediately, but she wasn't home. Then he began to think about his next steps. Divorce was inevitable, but how could he protect his assets? John had built a successful company from the ground up, and he had no intention of splitting it with Lisa. John decided to act coldly and methodically. He pretended to know nothing and began preparing for the divorce. He sold his car, then Lisa's, explaining that he wanted to buy something better. He kept the money for himself. His company, already struggling due to the pandemic, provided the perfect cover. He laid off all his employees, paid their salaries, and began the liquidation process. At the same time, he registered a new company under his 74-year-old mother's name. She was in good health and fully supported her son. By May 2024, John had completed his preparations. All that remained between him and Lisa was a 3-bedroom apartment in a new neighborhood and a country house. But the house was registered under John's mother's name, as the land it stood on had belonged to his grandparents. Lisa adored the house, but now it was lost to her. At the end of April, John decided to talk to Lisa. She had already sensed that something was wrong and was visibly nervous. When John showed her the video, she fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Lisa sobbed, saying she had made a mistake, but couldn't explain why it had happened. John remained unmoved. Their son Michael turned his back on Lisa. Emily was torn between her parents, and little Sophia didn't understand why her dad no longer lived with them. John hired a lawyer to divide the apartment and secure custody of Sophia. Lisa was left with nothing. No car, no money, no share in the company. She had lost everything they had built together. But the story didn't end there. John decided to confront Mark, Lisa's lover. He hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Mark's life. It turned out that Mark wasn't just Lisa's colleague. He was a key figure in a major financial scam that could destroy the company's reputation. John gathered evidence and handed it over to the authorities. Mark was arrested, and his career was ruined. Lisa, left without support, tried to return to John, but he remained firm. However, fate had another surprise in store for him. One evening, while John was at home with Sophia, there was a knock at the door. A woman stood there, introducing herself as Mark's sister. She revealed that Mark had blackmailed Lisa, threatening to expose her past, a secret she had kept hidden all these years. It turned out that before meeting John, Lisa had been involved in fraud, and Mark had used this information to manipulate her. John was stunned. He didn't know how to react to this revelation. On one hand, Lisa had been a victim of blackmail, but on the other, she had betrayed his trust. He decided to talk to Lisa one more time. This time, she told him the whole truth. Lisa admitted that she had been afraid of losing everything they had and had succumbed to Mark's threats. John realized that their story was more complicated than he had thought. He couldn't forgive Lisa, but he now saw that she, too, had been a victim of circumstances. They decided to maintain a friendly relationship for the sake of their children, especially Sophia. John let Lisa keep the apartment, but took the country house for himself. He continued to grow his new company, while Lisa began a new life, trying to rebuild her relationships with her children. But the most unexpected twist came a year later. John received a letter from an anonymous sender. It contained information that Mark, while in prison, had orchestrated an escape and was planning to take revenge on John and Lisa. John realized that their story wasn't over yet, and now he had to protect his family from a new threat. And so began a new chapter in John's life, a chapter filled with danger, intrigue, and a fight to protect those he loved. The story of John and Lisa became more than just a tale of betrayal and divorce. It became a story of how a man, faced with pain and deception, finds the strength to protect himself and his loved ones, even when it seems like all is lost.